Welcome into this Wednesday edition Oxford Exxon podcast. Parham and Neal McCready. I'll tell you about Clark Ford in a minute, even though we're not technically in the studio right now. Plenty of ice still remaining on the ground. Same story as yesterday, except even colder. Woke up this morning, 1 degree outside in Lafayette County this morning. Yes, 1 degree. I will give them at least this. The windshield, because there was no wind, was also 1. So we had that going for us. It was not in the negatives. From a windshield this morning, we will talk about a busy day for Ole Miss, but frankly a negative one. Derek Nix headed to Auburn. Some interesting parts of that. We'll get into that a little bit here this morning. We were first reported that this morning around 6 on the message board, and then Ole Miss made it official a few minutes ago around 8 o'clock a.m. on social media. And then Ole Miss loses Tyler Barron to Louisville yesterday, the Tennessee defensive lineman who had committed to Ole Miss in the portal last month, just recently. Now headed to Louisville with Tamarion McDonald, maybe somebody else in that as well. So a lot going on here this morning on the show. We'll get to all that. The basketball team is in Baton Rouge tonight, 6 o'clock, for the Rebels and the Tigers there in LSU. So, again, those are the main topics. We'll get to all of it here on the show. A show brought to you every day by the Oxford Exxon, Highway 6 West in Oxford. Lunch specials, $5.69, a couple sides, bread, any size fountain drink. Look, it's pretty treacherous out there right now. If you need a convenience store, need fuel, stop into the Oxford Exxon. They're up and down I-55 and throughout North Mississippi as well. They're with Blue Sky locations. They've got the big superstore coming in Macomb here soon, and much more. So all that's going on with the Oxford Exxon. We're also tell you about Clark Ford. Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi, 662-257-1900. Highway 25 South. Corey wants to be your car guy, wants to be your truck guy. He will take care of you no matter where you are in the process. Give Corey a call. He'll move you along, maybe sell you a vehicle along the way, give you a great deal there with Clark Ford and Amory. And again, I guess sort of Neil joining on the Campbell Clinic hotline.
All guests join on the Campbell Clinic hotline. Campbell Clinic in Oxford now, 2608 South Lamar Boulevard, Suite 102, just across the street from the cottages at Hooper Hollow. Campbell Clinic provides full-service orthopedic care, everything from sports medicine to foot and ankle surgery to spine and total joint care, pediatric orthopedics, physical therapy, and more. To book an appointment, go to campbellclinicoxford.com or call 901-759-3111. Walk-ins always welcome at the Campbell Clinic Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m.
So, jump into it here quickly from an MPW digital standpoint. Several podcasts coming out yesterday since the last time we talked to you. Neil and Tyler had a McCready and Siskey. And then I talked to Walker Jones, head of the Grove Collective. We discussed a lot of what Charlie Baker has talked about, his potential plan, his framework for the NCAA, how collectives would potentially fit into that as well. So we got that up, and then Brian ran a pretty entertaining podcast with William Liston yesterday. He had talked to Liston right after the Peach Bowl, within an hour and a half or so at the end of the game. So they get into some neat stuff there. That also up at MPW Digital. So a lot of stuff going on there on the podcast network outside of our show in the last 24 hours. But in a text message, I'll give him credit, Neil. Tower sent a tweet to you and I yesterday and said that he felt like it was professional wrestling more than football at this point. And we've kind of made that joke for a while, but it feels more true than ever because of the lack of stability when it comes to players and getting in class and all this stuff and all the movement and all the things we keep talking about. And then, in addition to it, this Derek Nix thing is fairly fascinating because when you break it down, Derek Nix has been at Ole Miss through 4 head coaches now. I think 16 total years is what Ole Miss had it at, so I haven't done the math, but I'll take their word for it. That's Houston Nutt, that's Hugh Freeze, that's Matt Luke, and now that's Lane Kiffin. Has been just a Mississippi staple and Ole Miss staple in this coaching staff for such a long time. And this has been going on for about a week, played out in social media through Lane Kiffin's Twitter account. Hugh identified Derek very early following the job opening there at Auburn for offensive coordinator, as Hugh typically does. People he has worked with formerly is who comprises his list most of the time. And really from the beginning, Lane was putting out tons of freeze warning tweets, was either quote tweeting or linking a lot of stories about how Hugh had said he is going to have play calling duties next year at Auburn. And that's continued all the way into now. We were Neil and I were both told that there was some contractual basis behind some of these things from a play calling standpoint, as in potential buyout amounts and lateral moves and things of that nature that would potentially get some money back in Ole Miss's pocket should Nix leave for the Auburn job without play calling duties. And Hugh came out publicly within the last 10 days and said he would call plays next season. That's what Lane kept tweeting out. And even now to the announcement this morning, I'll read it here. This is from Ole Miss Football on their normal letterhead kind of thing they do on social media when they have an announcement, kind of the new version of the notes app. It says, quote, "We are grateful for Coach Nix and express our gratitude to Derek and his family for their invaluable contributions and dedication to the success we have achieved at Ole Miss. Acknowledging the opportunity to become a first-time play caller with full-time play calling duties as offensive coordinator at Auburn University. We extend our sincere well wishes to the Nix family in this new endeavor. We will begin the search for a new wide receivers coach immediately with the objective of finding the best fit to coach the top wide receiver room in America." Lane Kiffin's signature on the bottom of that tweet. You know, I'm this is all happening in real time because, again, this came out 5, 6, 7 minutes before we started the show. So I haven't had a full ability to look around, to see what's going on, to kind of gauge a couple different things. And as I'm finishing that thought, I have one thing I want to look at real quick, and I'm doing it right now. And I was right here. Okay. Neil, I'm going to kind of just open this up to you to talk because as I'm finishing this thought, one more Twitter account real quick. I know it's bad pie, but I want to check one thing before I put a predicate on this. Ole Miss announced everything they just announced. Full play calling duties at Auburn, that Nix was leaving. They broke it. Auburn has not said a word yet about Derek Nix being their new offensive coordinator. That never happens, ever.
No, I checked a couple of Auburn accounts and I saw where Charles Goldberg referenced Lane Kiffin breaking the news. I sent something to Jay Tate. Said, "Hey, I think you can run with this because I've seen the words from Derek himself," and I think Jay had a story ready. Here's the part that's weird to me, and I'm just going to be honest here. How's Ole Miss going to know, anybody at Ole Miss, how are they going to know who's actually calling plays at Auburn? And why would, I'm having a hard time with this. I mean, really I am. I'm trying to guard my words. There's a criticism I want to levy here, and it's not worth it for me to do it. It's just not worth it. I can't win, and so there's no point in doing it. But I don't know how you can look at a football game as a third party and go, here's who's calling the plays. And if Derek is getting paid to be an offensive coordinator, and he has the title of offensive coordinator, I don't see how it really matters to Ole Miss whether Derek calls 10% of the plays, 82% of the plays, none of the plays, or every play. I don't see how that's something that you're actually going to be able to get involved in. And frankly, as a team that doesn't play Auburn next season, any energy that you spend on that feels wasted. I'm really struggling with why.
Like I said, contractually was the only way I could even make it make sense. Otherwise, yeah, I don't really get. Because like I made the point to you, I guess 2 days ago is when we were talking about this. Cover Ole Miss every day, and it is a constant question on who's calling plays, and the answer is everybody, and it doesn't really matter, and there's no way to actually put any sort of percentage on it. Who knows? Who cares?
Yeah.
So the only thing that makes any logical sense is that it's contractual, right?
I mean, I guess, but again, who's enforcing that? Are you
no one. I mean,
are you sending? That's my point. Are you sending a judge into the Auburn press box on football games, into the coach's box, and putting him on a headset to listen to what percentage of the plays whoever calls? It all felt weird to me over the last few days. All the stuff on Twitter and all the freeze warnings and all, it felt weird. I'm just being honest. I shouldn't say that because it's not something we're supposed to say. But it was just odd. I mean, Derek's been at Ole Miss for a long time. I think he has some head coaching aspirations. Um, I full disclosure, I really like Derek Nix. I think he's a really good recruiter. He was a running backs coach for the longest time. He switched to wide receivers coach. I don't know football well enough to be able to tell you how good or not good of a running backs coach or a wide receivers coach that he is. And that's not an insult. I would say that about almost anybody. But he's a very good recruiter. He's been a very stable part of the Ole Miss staff since Houston Nutt. I saw someone on the message board post this. This is wild. The last time Ole Miss played a football game where Derek Nix wasn't on the coaching staff was the 2007 Egg Bowl with Ed Orgeron as the head coach. It's been that long. I mean, he's seen everything you can see at Ole Miss, from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. He's from Alabama. It's an opportunity. It's a resume enhancer because he's a coordinator position. And look, does this lead to him being a head coach down the road? I don't know. Hugh's going to call the plays. Hugh has said he's going to call the plays. But as a head coach, you still have to have someone run the offense all week. You have to have someone who can help you, who there's too many duties as a head coach, from administrative stuff to scheduling to recruiting to game day recruiting to all of the things you have to do as a Power 4 head coach. So this is, at least on paper, a promotion. I'm going to assume that financially it's a promotion. So I don't understand some of the sniping stuff.
It is a financial promotion, yes, 100%.
Yeah, I don't get the snipey, sarcastic, snarky stuff all week on Twitter. I really don't.
And it might be what's said in the stream, and I kind of agree with you. Again, I'm digesting this in real time, so it's not like I had hours to kind of prep my thoughts. It would only be odd because it came from a university account, and they typically don't get kind of down in the weeds like that. But this might just be Kiffin being incredibly sarcastic and going, hey, congrats on those play calling duties you're not going to get. Literally, this might just be complete pettiness in the official announcement. Because again, unless I'm just missing something, it's unprecedented for the leaving school to announce a departure. That's incredibly strange.
But I mean, if you were in the room, the advice you would give is, hey, be magnanimous. Be big here. Congratulate him. Thank him for his years of service. I mean, Derek's been at Ole Miss since I have. His first spring practice at Ole Miss was my first day on the gig. The fact that the two of us lasted this long is remarkable. I'm not making it about me. I'm just saying it's been a minute. Carson was one.
Had somebody told you in 2008, hey, you're going to outlast Derek Nix, you thought, well, I mean, okay, sure, he's just going to go to he's going to go wherever in 2 years, and cool, sweet.
I would have said, so yeah, they get fired in 3 years? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'll be honest. This will make some people mad. I think it's been a really bad look this week.
Again, this just happened. I don't know what Ole Miss is going to do. I would assume that a front runner is Kelvin Bolden to get put on the on-field staff. That would make sense to me.
That makes a lot of sense. He's been a terrific recruiter, been a big part of what they're doing. He's going
to keep him.
He's going to start getting pursued by other programs. So when you have success, people try to take from your company. That's just how it works. And so, people are going to try to take from what Ole Miss has done. And I think promoting him and at least trying to put him in a position where the only way he leaves is to be a coordinator would be a pretty smart move here.
It appears that there's heat to the Cox thing from a tight ends coach standpoint.
Yeah.
Bolden at wide receiver would make sense. That would kind of fit all the different elements there. And look, I mean, Bolden becomes really critical because Derek Nix has been one of your key Mississippi infantry people for a long time inside the state. Ole Miss put a really good class together inside the state of Mississippi. Derek has been very good at that for a really, really, really long time, heading that part of the deal up. So, I mean, there is a loss in that way. Having Pete helps, having Bolden helps, but it's a critical thing. And I mean, like Neil said, I really like Derek. I mean, he's just been around so long that he's so kind of ingrained and just a presence in what we do. I mean, hell, our kids were in school together. It's kind of interesting, but he took an opportunity. I don't want to get into anybody's business to this point because it's none of my business, but I think that some of the retirement stuff has been completely overplayed or not relevant at all. I think he simply is taking a larger salary and doing something that makes sense for him in his mind, professionally and financially at this point of his life. And again, he gave a place 16 years. It's a long time. Now, Ole Miss gave him 16 years too. That hardly ever works that way, but you know, when you step back and you're not, as somebody said in the stream, in the weeds, I get it. He likes you. I understand.
Sure. You know, I mean.
Now, what he's doing is he's gambling a little bit, and now you're gambling everywhere because who knows what's going to happen. But, I mean, Freeze gets run out in a year, and then you're scrambling a little.
Well, I'm sure he's got buyout language in his contract. I'm sure he's got guarantees in his contract. And let's be real. Derek has the type of experience that if let's say that next season at Auburn, it went completely off the rails. Okay? 3-9. Disaster. Hugh gets fired. Everybody gets fired. It's not going to take Derek Nix a week to find another job.
Mm-hmm. In the SEC and Mississippi, wherever he wants it.
He has way too much experience, too good of a reputation, really solid recruiter, all of that stuff. Knows probably every high school coach one can know in a 2 to 3 state region. Good with kids. Kids like him. Kids who've played for him like him. He's got contacts in the 7-on-7 world with the Shea Hodges, Mike Espys, those kinds of people. It would take Derek Nix no longer than a week to get a job. So is it even a gamble on his end? Not really. You know, not really. I mean, the gamble you take is that, and again, I don't know that professionally you can look at it this way. You've been at Ole Miss this long. You've been an integral part of building it to this place, to where you feel like you're about to make a run, and now you might not be a part of that run when they reach the pinnacle. That's the gamble. But you know, that's letting emotion make a decision as opposed to making a pragmatic decision. And pragmatically, getting the title of offensive coordinator, a raise, security, you know, it's pretty meaningful.
The other news yesterday, Tyler Barron headed to Louisville, the Tennessee player who had committed to Ole Miss in the portal, and then now is headed to the Cardinals along with his former teammate and now current teammate, Tamari McDonald, who also was at Ole Miss for a hot minute. And then Neil, we reported yesterday, maybe a little bit of juice with Taz Nicholson as well in that regard. Louisville being a bit of a pain in the ass for Ole Miss right now.
Yeah, the Barron thing is done. I think that he's definitely going to Louisville.
Yes, yeah, it's done.
And then Nicholson, I don't know that it's been announced or whatnot, but the same people on the Louisville side who were saying it was done with Barron were saying it was getting done with Nicholson. And I know the question on this is, well, how's that possible? Because the drop ad date at Louisville has already passed, and I don't know the answer. The only answer I've got on all this is that,
as our boy Cardell said back in the day, we're playing school at this point. It doesn't. Yeah. They'll figure it out.
I'm going to punish myself anytime effective after this moment that I use the word student athlete. I'm just going to call them football players. They're majoring in football. So I don't know how the scheduling and all that stuff works. And I mean, people are like, well, if Ole Miss had started classes earlier, well, they wouldn't have had class yesterday or today, so they'd still be in the waiting game. And if a guy's continuing to take bids, there's nothing you can really do about it. You can't. There's nothing you signed them to. It's why back during all the portal madness, sometimes I would remind people like they don't. People say, when's he going to sign? And
He
you see
doesn't.
people you'd say people write he signed with. I'm like, no, he didn't sign anything, man. He might have signed some paperwork, but the paperwork's not binding anywhere
Yeah.
else. So you just commit. You give them your word. And in college football, with college football players, your word's typically not worth a whole hell of a lot.
It and for anybody asked, intercession does not count. They have to be a full-time student to be locked in. So he could have gone to all the intercession in the world, and it wouldn't have made any difference. He still could have left and gone to Louisville. He
It's got to
has
be
to be
taking
enrolled.
12. Got to be taking 12 hours of courses.
Yes, has to be a full-time student.
So I
Well, it's
guess if you
about
took 4 intercession classes, which would be fascinating, but
it's
no,
not
I mean
wow.
you can't start until January.
I guess it was about a week ago. There was some concern about him. He was looking for places to live, was trying to figure it out. And it seemed to get fixed at that point because he found a place to live and seemed to be progressing toward enrolling. I mean, I wrote that on the message board because all signs pointed to it, and it seemed like they had avoided that problem. And it just never completely locked in. Don't think he signed his lease, just never fully kind of got ingrained and all the things, even prior to class, that would make it where everything seemed okay. And then yesterday it went to hell in a handbasket at that point. And look, I assume that there's some sort. And again, this is not a judgment on Louisville in any way. It is where college football is sitting in 2024. It's what Walker talked about yesterday. It's why Walker really wants some sort of database for agents and people who can do contact with kids for just full transparency on all sides. It's frankly to protect the kids in some way because they got handlers and all these people saying they're agents and advisors and coming and going left and right, and then for the schools and the collectives to know who the hell they're dealing with and what's going on from that standpoint as well. It feels agent related where they brokered a deal with Louisville, got multiple guys in, took some bids, did that. But again, that is college football. That's everybody. It just is what it is. But that, if you wanted me to explain what's going on, that is probably what my guess would be as we sit here today. Is I think that's most likely what happened.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I think too.
Well, and it's funny because I think some of the message boards said this morning, Ole Miss has been very successful, and this kind of comes with it, and you asked for it. I found it, Ole Miss and Louisville have had very little history outside of a game in the Georgia Dome or Mercedes-Benz or wherever the hell that was a couple years ago. The football recruiting guy for Louisville kind of coming right at Ole Miss and making fun of Juice and a lot of that stuff yesterday, and you thought, like, I know it's just perping up your own program, but it's interesting to me a little bit that they pulled off a couple wins right there. Definitely, I mean, Barron's a loss for Ole Miss. There's no way around that. But, to then target shots at another school that they don't really have any rivalry or history with whatsoever, it's just another sign of sort of where we are in this dumb PR-driven world of college football in January of 24. Nothing makes a lot of sense to me right now.
It's the professional wrestling part of it. It's that comment was dead on. It's everyone sees a lot of like you and I've had this conversation. Like a lot of the Twitter stuff, I don't really care for it, but that's probably me being an old man. It's just not my style. I don't really like all the trash talk, but young people do, and so Kiffin gets a lot of benefit from it, and so people are going to emulate that. So people come back and try to make it look funny in professional wrestling, and you do the big interview where you yell at the announcer, and then you go have a boring match, and then you come back and the interviews are more fascinating are more entertaining than the matches themselves, right? And it's kind of where we are. Everyone's looking for cred and trying to get traction with kids and stuff, and you use Twitter as a trash talking apparatus.
One of the deals with Ole Miss in this, it's such a struggle, and it's why this intercession thing and how late they start is a problem because they can't get these kids locked in. They're just constantly taking bids, and you're constantly keeping it going to get them set. Because, look, with Nick's leaving, you got to make sure all your high school kids are okay going into the 22nd for different reasons and all this stuff. I mean, there's freedom of movement right here with some of those things. But, the point with that a little bit is that it being so late when all this is going on is even affecting Ole Miss with replacements. I mean, I know there's a post on the board about, hey, this guy reached out, but if he's calling it with Judkins. If Judkins or Barron or any of those dudes had done this 3 weeks ago, that's a different pool of players that are available to you to replace with versus when it happens on January the 16th. I mean, just by rule and the way it all works, it's a much smaller way. So getting the one-for-one replacement is much more complicated or not as possible as it would have been at a previous time where you've got some money to spend from a collective standpoint and you can do this and you can do that. Because look at the corner situation. Look, I think Ole Miss gets the Walker kid from Michigan. He was highly recruited. He's a big kid. He's a converted wide receiver. He's got a lot of ball skills, but he hasn't played much. He played 66 snaps last season for the Wolverines. Hellaciously talented, but that's not a one-for-one swap with DeCam Richardson, who's one of the top Pro Football Focus cornerbacks in college football, that's now headed to the NFL draft. So when it happens this late, it's just a deal where you're having to reach a little more, worry about a project, you need something to work out. It changes the dynamics in the calculus versus had this stuff just happen in the middle of December and you could run through the portal like necessary. And that's where it is biting Ole Miss right now. I mean, they're really having to keep people tied up and not locked in a system that promotes not being locked up and tied in. And that's what's going on right now. So it's the overall issue is a problem more than any necessarily one player. But look, Barron's a loss. There's no way to get around that. And I see in the thread Hardman saying the DB from Illinois, that's not a loss. The problem is you keep losing corners in general, bodies. I mean, if you lose all the corners you got in the portal, you need corners. I mean, it's not necessarily that Nicholson was going to be some all-SEC corner, but he is a Big Ten cornerback who's played a lot of college football. And you brought him in for a reason here.
You can't on one hand celebrate the acquisition, and then when you lose the acquisition go, well, it was no big deal. He couldn't play anyway. Well, then why were we celebrating when he got him?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just spin. No, these are losses. Are they end of the world? Do they mean you're never going to win another game? Does it mean you're not a playoff team? Of course not. But you can't say someone's is a big deal, and then when you lose them, oh, well, he can't play. That doesn't work. That's just spin.
Well, I mean, as Grind said, yeah, I mean, Etienne for Judkins would have been closer to a one-for-one. But with Diggs, he might have one hell of a season, but he's got an ACL issue, and he's probably going to miss a couple games to start the year. That's exactly the point right there. I mean,
100%.
Etienne would have been like, okay, I know what I'm getting, this and that, and you compare it and you go on, and that's what Ole Miss would have done.
Two things can
come out earlier.
Two things can be true at one time. You can do the right thing by hitting a place with Quinshon Judkins where you say, hey, it's just not worth it anymore. And it can also be a major loss that you have to try to figure out. Two things can be true at once. It's not either or. Quinshon was a terrific back, one of the best backs in the country. He was one of the best two backs in the SEC for the last 2 seasons. On a team that went 11-2, they had one all-SEC player, and it was him. So he is someone who must be replaced. Now, you don't have to replace him one for one, but you do have to replace him.
There is no world where Ole Miss is changing its academic schedule over an athletic situation. They make a fortune off intercession the way it is currently set up. It is a tremendous positive benefit to the university. No chance. And school will not start earlier next year. They probably already have the calendar out. It's going to be sometime between January 20th and January 25th, depending on how the calendar falls. So, no, 100%. It just is what it is.
Well, yeah,
it's a lot like when they go, hey, just change the out-of-state tuition situation for baseball. It's like that's millions of dollars. That is one of the key promotional things for the university. Sorry, no, not going to do it to get a couple more SEC baseball wins.
That would be incredibly stupid. No, they're not changing their academic calendar. It's the calendar they've used.
Yeah. A lot of kids take those intercession classes. And you pay full freight. That's not scholarship able.
If I were a college kid now, I would take intercession. Right.
Well, because you already get a huge break in December anyway. I mean, you've been home for 3 or 4 weeks by the time you'd have to show back up.
Well, it lets you take one fewer course in the fall or the spring, which is good. There's a big difference between managing 4 courses and 5 courses in the spring.
I mean, it does do that. That is the positive, Mark. Is what, yeah. I mean, Walker mentioned this yesterday. Is with classes starting, they actually have a better chance of grabbing players from any of these schools that lose head coaches. Washington, Alabama, Arizona, whatever comes of all these places. It is the positive is they have the ability to grab them later than a lot of schools would, because Ole Miss's drop ad date goes into damn February, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got another 2 weeks before that becomes, relevant.
And again, there's a portal window in May, and even before all of these things happened, the expectation among people close to the program was that they would be active in the May portal period. And obviously, that remains the case now.
So, anything else on either one of those guys before I move on? Derek, Barron?
No, I mean, just what I said about Derek from just a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him. I wish him the very best. I hope it works out for he and his family on every personal level possible.
Yeah, like I said, I guess I got to tell my kid that his daughter's leaving. I have not done that yet. Let's see. Ole Miss plays basketball.
Make sure that you dive into the play calling thing.
Well, see, Carly Ann, the way this works is he's going to get to do this now instead of this is how this works. Ole Miss, LSU basketball, Pete Maravich Assembly Center tonight. The Rebels, by far, their better chance of grabbing a road win on the week. They're at Auburn on Saturday. That's a toughie, but they get the Tigers tonight. An LSU team that's played okay, played better, but definitely flawed. I was looking up the line right now. I don't even know what it is at this point. Again, Ken Pom giving Ole Miss a 44% chance of winning the game, which the computers do not like Ole Miss at all. So I'm assuming that if you ran kind of a recency thing, Ole Miss would be a slight favorite in this game. LSU coming off a 93-78 loss to Auburn in its last game. That was in Auburn for that one. Prior to that, they'd won 4 in a row. They beat Lamar and Northwestern State to cap non-con play. And then they beat Texas A&M on the road in College Station 68-53. Just kind of a strange result in that one. And they beat Vanderbilt 77-69 at home in Baton Rouge. After Ole Miss, they get Texas A&M at home and then head to Georgia as well. Have you watched LSU at all this year? No?
A little bit. I haven't watched them much. I've probably watched parts of a couple of games. They've played better of late. Early in the year, they weren't very good at all. I mean, I think this is kind of, and I think Ken Palms of the world have said as much. I think this is kind of a coin toss game tonight.
Protect the basketball. LSU is 9th in the country in steal percentage. They cause a lot of turnovers, and they've been fairly balanced from an analytical standpoint. Efficiency-wise, LSU 125th nationally in offense, 52nd in defense. They played really good defense right here in second year under Pat McMahon, kind of running through. On offense, though, they really give the ball away, so it's kind of funny. They're one of the best teams in the country at causing steals, but you can put them into turnovers quickly. They're 335th nationally in protecting the basketball offensively, which is not good. That's a problem. So
to me, this is one of those games where if Brakefield is contributing on the offensive end, Ole Miss probably wins because they'll outscore them. If Jamin has one of those games where he's sort of non-existent offensively, it's going to be a slog. And it also depends on how the game's officiated. Like, I watched a couple of college games last night, and in both of them, they really called the game tight. Really there was a tight whistle, and the game had no flow, and it was just kind of weird. So I've seen some Ole Miss games get played where they let them play, and I think Ole Miss benefits from that. And then I've seen some games where they really call a tight whistle, and I don't think that's Ole Miss's style.
That was one of the reasons why the game got kind of weird on Saturday for a minute, because in the first half, they let everything go against Vanderbilt. I mean, didn't call whistles on either team at all. I mean, it was just a really free-flowing 20 minutes. And then in the second half, they went completely a 180 and started calling every hand check for 10 minutes, and it sort of muddied it up, and Ole Miss didn't handle it very well, and that's what brought Vanderbilt back within 3 prior to them stretching it back out and winning by 13 or whatever they did. I see in the stream LSU favored by 3.5 in this one. I like the Ole Miss if I'm getting 3.5. And 149, I believe, is the total. They said, yeah, 149 and a half is the number on that. And yeah, Brakefield was non-existent on Saturday after having 20 whatever he had the time before.
Yeah,
So it comes and goes.
it does. It's just their fourth SEC game together, right? I mean, they're still very much a work in progress. I mean, they're going to be assuming they stay healthy, they're going to continue to improve. It's a big opportunity tonight. It's because Saturday is going to be a daunting assignment at Auburn. So a win tonight just really keeps them ahead of schedule, gives them a big road win, makes Auburn a free shot, all of those things. So I'm not saying it's a make or break game, but if our
Counting wins.
If our belief is accurate that they need to get to 10 SEC wins to feel like they've got their ticket punched, a win tonight obviously would be massive in a number of ways.
At LSU tonight, at Auburn on Saturday, and Arkansas at home next Wednesday. 2-1 looks so much better than 1-2 right there.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah, I
I
watched Arkansas A&M last night. I kept falling asleep, but I woke up to see the end of it. That was a weird game. Arkansas had a big lead. A&M came back. Yeah, Taylor made a three with 10 seconds left or so to give A&M a lead, and then Arkansas drove and scored on its final possession to
78-77 the final in that one.
You kind of felt like Arkansas was due. They're a little too athletic and too talented to be as bad as they've been. So you sort of felt like they were going to put a game together, and they avoided it. That would have been, for them, that would have been a disastrous loss to blow up that kind of a lead at home against A&M. But they made the play and got the bucket and got the W. So they kind of collectively, I would think, can take a deep breath here a little bit and try to put some things together. And for A&M, that was, boy, you had a huge win in your hands and you let it get away.
That felt like a big swing loss for A&M as I look at this thing. Yeah, Mark for Arkansas goes for 35. Wade Taylor the fourth for A&M goes for 41 last night, including that three late. A&M now 10-7 overall, 1-3 in the SEC.
Yeah.
Ugh. 11-6 and 2-2 looks like a totally different resume.
Taylor's really, really good, and the rest of that team is just not. They've not played as well as I think a lot of people thought they would, self-included. I thought they'd be a lot better than that.
Arkansas got its first SEC win. They are now 10-7 and 1-3 as well. So identical records for those two teams after last night. Elsewhere inside the SEC, Georgia now 3-1 in the SEC. They go on the road to Columbia, South Carolina. They knock off South Carolina 74-69. They were down one at the break and outscored them by 6 in the second half. Georgia now 13-4, 3-1. Carolina 14-3, 2-2. There after that one, Mike's done a nice job with that team.
He's done a hell of a job, Chase.
Yes.
He's done a hell of a job. Their one loss was to Tennessee, and they were very competitive in that game.
They were. They had like an 8 or 9 point lead at one point in the second half.
Mike's got those kids playing really hard for him right now.
Then the other two games last night were just two home teams that were better and won their games. Tennessee knocks off Florida to move to 3-1 in the SEC, 85-66 over the Gators. Golden's team's in trouble, 11-6, 1-3 in the SEC now. And then in Tuscaloosa last night, 93-75, the Tide over the Missouri Tigers. Missouri 8-9 overall, 0-4 in the SEC. Alabama 12-5, 4-0 in the SEC at this point. So
Tennessee looked like I watched a lot of that game. Tennessee looked like a Final Four team.
They have moments where they absolutely do.
And Alabama had some moments where they looked like a second weekend team too. I mean, I love what they get out of Grant Nelson, the player from, I guess he was from South Dakota. Everybody recruited him. He picked Alabama, and you can see why everybody wanted him. He is very impactful on a really athletic Alabama team.
Tonight, as we mentioned yesterday, along with the Ole Miss LSU game, again, that is at 6 o'clock there from Baton Rouge. That is on the SEC Network, if I have that right. It is. And then Mississippi State's at Kentucky tonight, 6 o'clock on ESPN2. Wildcats at home against the Bulldogs. Kentucky 2-1 in the SEC. Mississippi State 1-2 in the SEC. Oddly, Tennessee the one win for Mississippi State. And then Auburn is at Vanderbilt at 8 o'clock SEC Network, the back end of that doubleheader. Auburn is an 11.5-point favorite in Nashville, and Kentucky is a 6.5-point favorite at home against the Bulldogs. So those are your lines tonight in that action for the night. So huge game for Ole Miss. 6 o'clock SEC Network. Come hang out at Rebel Grove if you would like to. Chat about it. Watch it in real time for that. I see we like lines. It's very, very, very early. We don't even know rosters. But, hey, if you want to go ahead and bet on games for next year, we got one Ole Miss game on the books and several other games. You'd have to feel really confident about a game to bet it right now when you have no idea who's actually on the team you're betting for or against, right?
Yes.
Early lines for next season, the one Ole Miss line that has been announced is the Ole Miss-Georgia game, which is going to happen in, November? But sure, whatever. Georgia is a 3.5-point favorite in Oxford next November.
That's all?
3.5.
By the way, Caleb Downs is going to get in the transfer portal.
Okay.
I'm going to save everybody a lot of thought if you want.
Okay.
Yes, I could probably write a story that says, here's how he fits at Ole Miss. Yes, Caleb Downs fits everywhere. He's going to Georgia.
He is?
Yes.
You feel good about it?
Yes.
Okay. So these are from FanDuel Sportsbook. I'll just run them through quickly. Brett McMurphy posting them this morning. Games for next season. Florida State is a 12.5-point favorite against Georgia Tech in the opener in Dublin next year. So FSU minus 12.5 against Tech. Texas A&M is a 1.5-point favorite against Notre Dame next season. Georgia is a 12.5-point favorite against Clemson in Atlanta next season. So Georgia 12.5, Clemson. Texas is a 1.5-point favorite at Michigan next season. Texas 1.5 at Michigan. LSU is a 6-point favorite against Southern Cal in Las Vegas next season. LSU minus 6 against USC. Georgia is a 2.5-point favorite at Alabama next season. So Georgia 2.5 in Tuscaloosa. Michigan minus 11.5 at Washington. Oregon minus 1.5 at Ohio State. No, sorry, Ohio State at home. My fault. Ohio State at home. Georgia, as we said, 3.5 against Ole Miss and Oxford. LSU, a 1.5-point favorite against Alabama at home. Ohio State minus 6 against Michigan in Columbus. And then for some damn reason, this is here, Colorado minus 7.5 against North Dakota State next season. So,
if I offered you Georgia or the field to win the national title next year, where would you go?
I mean, I'll take the field, but if I lose, I wouldn't be stunned. But if you give me every other team, sure.
I think I'd take Georgia.
Really? Okay. I mean, it's not outlandish.
Motivated team, experienced quarterback, really good on both lines of scrimmage. They've gotten whatever they wanted out of the portal. Man, they're going to be some kind of talented on the defensive side of the ball. Good night.
And that schedule, and again, there's very few teams that can really compete with them, so it doesn't even really freaking matter. But in general, let me pull that up again. Got it here.
They open with Clemson in Atlanta, I think.
Yeah, that was that 12.5-point line that I just gave you. That's August 31st. Clemson in Atlanta. Tennessee Tech. At Kentucky. An open date prior to at Alabama.
Okay.
Auburn at home. Mississippi State at home. At Texas. Another bye week. Florida and Jacksonville. At Ole Miss. Tennessee. UMass. Georgia Tech. They have a difficult schedule.
It's a real schedule.
I mean, if it's anybody but Georgia, you'd be looking at their schedule going, God, some bitch.
But they don't have to go undefeated to make the playoffs.
That's the key in this. And that's why you have a better argument for just taking Georgia. Is that if I look at that schedule and it's the old system, I go, well, one loss and who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you go, whatever. But now you just get in. And who says Georgia can't go win 3 or 4 games? I get it.
I would, if you offered me the field or Georgia, I would take Georgia.
And they're the only school you would do that with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other school, I'd say give me the field.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, that's
They have to
their
go
schedule
to
could easily include, at least on paper today, 4 playoff teams at least.
Alabama, Clemson, Ole Miss, Texas,
In Texas.
and maybe Tennessee. So maybe
Yeah,
even
actually,
5.
Tennessee. I actually was thinking Tennessee, not Clemson, but you're right. 100%. Tennessee feels 9-3 and on the fringe.
Yeah. What Tennessee has that has everybody excited right now is that the quarterback Nico Iamaleava looked so. I think it's Iamaleava, by the way. He looked so good in the game against Iowa. People can make all the Iowa jokes you want, but Iowa's defense. I mean, not Wisconsin. Wisconsin's defense was okay.
No, it was Iowa.
Was it Iowa? Okay,
It was
yeah.
Iowa. LSU played Wisconsin.
LSU played Wisconsin. Yeah, you can make all the jokes you want about Iowa, but their defense is very, very good. And he sort of had his way with it.
More signs of what we talked about yesterday, because again, you've got Eric Ross coming to Ole Miss, the AD from Tech, who's in a deputy role in the SEC. Kane, obviously the Alabama defensive coordinator, and then Alabama also now is going to add Marcus Linguist, who is the head coach at Buffalo, to its defensive backs coach job. Position coach at Alabama over Buffalo's head coach. Welcome to 2024.
It's a cunning move for Alabama.
Yeah. It's good. Excellent. No comment, but yes, I got it.
Missouri was trying to hire him reportedly as defensive coordinator, and he joined the Alabama staff.
Really?
That's what I've heard.
Randy asking off topic, what are the best races in the Oxford area? You did the Great 38. That's a good question. I was actually trying to find some the other day to kind of plan my year out a little bit, and I'm not seeing many in town. I feel like we have less than we used to. Maybe they get popped up later in the year or get announced. Because, yeah, I've done the Great 38 a couple times, too. I don't know. Outside of Double Decker, I had a hard time finding anything farther than a 5K. So I'm not a good resource on that.
The
I know
38
Tupelo
10 mile.
38 is a weekend where you can do a 5K, an 8 miler, or a half marathon. Those are the 3 distances. So I've run the 8 miler multiple times. Tupelo does the 14.2 in September, but it's like out in the middle of nowhere, and it starts at 5 a.m. Those are the negatives with that race, is that you have to be on the starting line at like 4:45 in the morning out in like Enville, Chesterville.
No, I'm good.
That's the issue with that. So yeah, it's been tough. I was kind of trying to put like 5 or 10 together for the year in a 30, 40, 50 mile radius, and that's been a little complicated. I'm hoping more get announced as time goes on. But I don't know. That's a good question. So anyway, Ole Miss LSU tonight in Baton Rouge for that one. Again, we'll continue to talk about Derek Nix, what comes next for Ole Miss with Kelvin Bolden, potentially an option there, and then just get a little more clarity on what's somewhat going on. When will Auburn actually announce this move, Neil? I mean, are we going to be hours from Auburn actually agreeing with Ole Miss that it's done?
I mean, I would guess that they'll announce it this morning, but I hadn't. Like I said, I just checked a couple of accounts on Twitter, and I never even went to any sites or anything.
It's weird.
I mean, I would.
Again, I understand why. I'm not asking you a question. I'm just pointing out again. This is really strange.
It's weird. Yeah, I mean, look, Lane doesn't like Hugh Freeze. So maybe this is just, I don't know whether this is just anger or this, it's this, I don't know, it's just weird. It's kind of a shame they don't play each other next year.
Yeah.
Auburn hasn't released it yet, Auburn football or Auburn University or anything like that?
Nope, nothing. Nothing at all. Jay published his story 32 minutes ago. But otherwise, nothing. that I'm seeing. And the story headline from AuburnSports.com was Nick's expected to be hired away from Ole Miss. So it was even loosely done. We'll see. Crazy thing. Mike Tomlin announces he will be back next season at Pittsburgh. Just quickly, some NFL movement that is going on. Bill Belichick interviewed with the Falcons yesterday. So now he has he'd already done that. Jim Harbaugh interviewed with the Falcons yesterday. Sorry, I've got the wrong coach there in my head. Harbaugh to the Falcons, and from an interview standpoint, I still think he takes the Chargers job. There have been no movement yet with Mike McCarthy or Nick Sirianni, the head coaches of the Cowboys or the Eagles. My guess is they still fire the Cowboys coach, and maybe the Philadelphia gets another year. And
what did you make of the Jerry Jones interview after the game the other day, where he's trembling, his eyes are watering? Did you see that?
I saw the quotes. I did not actually see the video. No.
I mean, he wasn't crying.
He was emotional.
He was emotional. Yeah, his face was trembling. His eyes were teary. It was just kind of odd.
I mean, he's not stepping away.
No.
Not until his last breath.
I mean, people around that franchise saw something that I didn't see all year. I never once watched the Cowboys and thought that's a Super Bowl team.
Mm-hmm. And it's in their DNA at this point that they tighten up.
And it wasn't just the Prescott stuff. Like, I don't have
their defense sucked. Actually, Prescott's catching more heat than he should, even though he was bad too.
Yeah, he was bad, but there was a lot bad. It wasn't just him.
Mm-mm. I still expect Antonio Pierce to get the Raiders job. That's the other NFL opening that is going on. They appear to be fulfilling all their obligations prior to hiring him. They interviewed Leslie Frazier and Chris Richard yesterday.
The Vegas thing feels like if they can't get Harbaugh, they're going to promote Pierce.
Yeah. And I'm seeing very little Harbaugh move there at all. So, not really sure why Tomlin walked away from the question the other day, if he was just telling people right after that he's staying, but nonetheless, it is what it is. So that's probably all the movement. Again, we'll continue to watch the NFC East teams to see what the Eagles do, to see what the Cowboys do moving forward as well in that one. Nationally, the one basketball game, if you're just looking for something else to be on tonight, pretty good one in Storrs, Connecticut, as number 18 Creighton plays the Huskies tonight there with UConn. So Creighton-UConn, the best national game of the night as well. So anyway, Jeffrey, tomorrow on the show, I assume we'll have more podcasts to you, more coverage of Rebel Grove from all the fallout of the last 24 hours. Appreciate you guys in the stream as always, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.